Good evening. I'm Aromar Revi, the director of the Indian Institute for Human Settlements in India. I'm very glad to join you at the Resilient Cities 2014 conference in Bonn. My colleague David Satterthwaite and co-coordinating lead author of the IPCC AR5 on urban adaptation would have spoken to you earlier in the conference about the key messages that the IPCC brings to the urban and urban adaptation community in particular. Adaptation is becoming a very critical question for us to deal with as climate change processes pick up. We've now crossed the 400 ppm barrier, at least as far as the Northern Hemisphere is concerned, and we will go on to make serious choices about how we both mitigate and adapt over the next 2 or 3 decades. But I'm here to talk to you about a critical opportunity over the next 2 years, 2014 and 2015, because we will find a unique confluence of 3 different international processes that come together. The first is the transition from the Millennium Development Goals, which the UN set up nearly 15 years ago, into the Sustainable Development Goals, or what we call the post-2015 process. The second is the revision of the Global Risk Framework, or what we call HFA2, which actually builds a new post-2015 risk framework for all the countries of the world, and of course, therefore, for all the cities and the mayors of the world. And finally, the prospect that we have of seeing an important agreement in Paris in December 2015 around COP21 and the UN FCCC. But bringing all of this together has been a fairly complex task. I think one of the major achievements of the urban community over the last year and a half, and many of us have worked very hard at this, is to bring cities into the forefront of the discussion around the Sustainable Development Goals. Till early 2013, cities were not really on the frame. The Millennium Development Goals, for example, do not have a goal that focuses on cities. We have goals that focus on slum areas. We have a number of goals that deal with questions of water supply, sanitation, and other forms of poverty. But for the first time, we saw the entire community come together with UN Habitat, with ICLEI, with UCLG, with Cities Alliance, with C40, with SDI, and cities from across the world. I think now we're up to more than 250 cities and mayors from across the world who are helping support a global campaign around an urban sustainable development goal. There are a large number of member states in the UN who are not necessarily convinced that we should have an independent, standalone goal around urban sustainability. And of course, by logical extension, that means something that deals with urban resilience within the frame of the Sustainable Development Goals is also a challenge for all of us. So the first question, of course, is having brought together the bulk of, as I said, the urban community across the world, is to try and bring together key countries and key groupings to be able to sign off on a goal that focuses on urban sustainability. And as in everything else around the SDGs, it will have to focus on 3 broad things. The first and most important, in some senses, is the question of economic sustainability and, of course, economic resilience. And then, of course, questions of social sustainability, addressing issues of asymmetry, whether it's asymmetry across gender, race, ethnicity, and caste, and especially in our part of the world, are central questions that we have to address. And finally, of course, ecological and environmental sustainability and resilience, which has become the focus of a whole range of processes across most regions of the world. And within that, of course, both climatic and other risks are absolutely critical. So in bringing all of these 3 agendas together, we hope to actually build a frame in which sustainable development, or the sustainable goal around cities, is actually able to address these questions in an integrated manner, and also address the concerns of a whole range of nation states. I think the most serious concern, of course, is keeping the balance between the rural and the urban. Earlier this year, when I spoke to the Open Working Group at the UN General Assembly, essentially what I told them was that it's impossible for us to conceive of sustainable cities without sustainable agriculture, food security, and rural areas in which we see not only the end of rural poverty, which plagues billions of people across many parts of the world, especially in Asia and in sub-Saharan Africa. But it is only possible if cities are managed and are able to transform themselves in a sustainable manner. The second thing that I stressed quite strongly is that cities are actually at the forefront of implementation or potential implementation of sustainability. It's almost impossible with about 70% of the world economy, half the world's population, much of the incremental new employment, especially of young people, coming from cities. It is almost impossible for us in that context to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, to address a post-2015 agenda without addressing urban sustainability. The challenge is really to enable transformative development, and I hope the mayors that we see in this room and colleagues from across the world and across the global urban community are able to take this message across. And this is a significant new challenge of governance, because the nation states have not, in many cases, been very effective in enabling and empowering cities to perform the core functions that we require them to do. So in some senses, we're asking for a significant change in the current frame of development, and I think and I hope that this conference has really made significant progress in trying to lay out how this might be achieved.